Fan2Fan Detroit is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
This is Rick Mahorn. Listen to Fan2Fan Detroit on the Planet Ant Podcast Network.
Hey, welcome. Hey, man, how are you? Welcome in, everybody, to the 10th. That's right, 10. We made it to 10, the 10th episode of Fan2Fan Detroit. I am your host, Andrew Norris. You can find me on Twitter at Fan2FanDrew. This is my producer, Double P, producer Parker. You can find him at Parker_Hammond. Parker, what's going on, man? What's up with you?
I'm in a new location in my apartment today. Hopefully we will have put whatever dumb problems you're having last week behind us. But, I mean, you're still like half a person there. So, I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, well, at least as of right now, we're not getting kicked out of here, so it's good. We got a cool show for you. We finally are going to talk some Tigers baseball, some Tigers prospects. We planned on doing it last week. We moved it to this week. Everything you need to know, where are they, where are they going to be, and how long is it going to take for them to get here? We have our top 5 greatest one-hit wonders in sports history. There's some really interesting years from guys that you just out of nowhere that I'm kind of excited to go over. We, of course, got to talk about the wrap-up of the Jordan doc. It's finally over. It's sad, but it was time for it to end. It was they were trying to cram everything in there at the end, if you could tell. And then
a whole 20 minutes.
We have and then we have what would you love to see a sports doc about outside of what we've already seen? But man, what have you been doing during quarantine? What is your life been like over the last couple weeks? Now we're in. Now we're pros. Now we are seasoned vets. We know what we're doing at this point. We know how to handle this. So what is your day-to-day like now?
Well, you asked in like the worst day. I yesterday was just like an abomination of a day. I just sat around and did nothing, which is something I've really tried hard to avoid doing. I've been doing like various shows on the network here. I've been doing the show and a couple other shows. I've been writing a lot, cooking a lot. I made an omelet at 5:30 in the morning today. I mean, whatever. Time has kind of become an illusion for me. I feel like there is no time, there is no date, there is only inside.
Yeah, well, when you have like 3 consecutive months of just no responsibilities, nothing to do, It 7 o'clock in the morning turns into 3 o'clock in the afternoon after a while, and everything gets out of whack. Before we get into everything, I want people to know about the power of social media and the negatives that it can bring. Today, there was a post from just some random account that nobody's ever heard of that says 15 years ago today, this happened. And it had a video of Malice at the Palace, Ron Artest beating the shit out of some Pistons fans. Ron Artest is now trending globally, and it didn't happen 15 years ago today. This happened in November of 2004, 2005. And it's just the whole world. It is all the discussion among sports Twitter right now. And it's just crazy how quickly it's blown up. Like, have you seen any of this? Have you followed along with it?
I saw the post that you're talking about. And I just think that's almost like a bit to me. Like, I like the idea of being like, 42 years ago today, Jack Nicklaus won his first major. And just like putting it out there and seeing what happens and just lying about things. I think that's hilarious. I actually on stuff like that.
Well, I don't think it was something that was done like to get attention. I think they were just like they thought it was 15 years ago today, and then the stupid people of the world just jumped on it and ran with it.
I don't know, man. I think I'd rather hope that it's a bit than hope that somebody really thought that the middle of the basketball season was supposed to be happening right now.
Yeah, well, we all have hope, don't we? All right, let's jump right into Tigers talk. We're going to talk prospects first. Everybody knows the big guys, right? Everybody knows Casey Mize. Everybody knows Matt Manning. Everybody knows Riley Green. Most people know Tariq Scoobo. But where we get into the nitty gritty once we start talking about Isaac Paredes and Willie Castro and Joey Wentz and Daz Cameron, guys who the diehard Tigers fans will know about, but maybe people who aren't watching 140 games a year aren't super knowledgeable about yet. And the thing I always hear the most from Tigers fans when they're talking is they want to know which young pitchers are going to be where and when they're going to be there. And it's always disappointing. I can see it when I talk to Tigers fans. There's always a little bit of disappointment when they realize Casey Mize isn't going to be up this year. Even if there was a 162 game schedule, Casey Mize just isn't going to be here this year. And that's pretty simply because we have some guys in our rotation who we feel comfortable with, and there's no need to rush Casey Mize. He's going to be a star pitcher in this league, barring injury and things along those lines. He's going to be a stud. He already is. I mean, he threw a no-hitter in his first Double-A start last year. The kid is a tank. He's going to have one of the best splitters in the game. Matt Manning, kind of the same thing. I think he's a little bit more ready. He's been in the minor league system for a few more years than Mize has, as we drafted him straight out of high school when he was 18. But he's a big fireballer who still has some location issues, which is always a problem. It's something you can't have once you get to the big leagues, because once you start walking guys, that's your downfall. You can't be averaging, 3-4 walks per 9 once you get to the MLB. And Matt Manning's just got a little bit of tweaking still to do there. He's exciting. When he steps on the mound, he reminds you of Justin Verlander, that's for sure. The mannerisms, the height, the kind of the lankiness, he's just very similar to that guy. And the ceiling is just sky high. There seems to be no ceiling for Matt Manning. He could be as good as anybody, but he could also be as bad as anybody if he doesn't get that control taken care of and get it, at least like a 60 on a 20 to 80 scale. And again, if you haven't been with us before, 20 to 80 scale is how you scout in baseball. 20 being the worst, 80 being the best, of course. Very rarely will you see anybody with an 80 on this scale, but it goes by power, contact, fielding, arm, and speed. Those are all rated 20 to 80. And his control right now is probably a 30, maybe a 40, but he's got to get that up to 40 or 50 consistently to be able to be part of a major league rotation. The guys who we're probably going to see first, and it's not exciting, it's not flashy names, but that's going to be 23-year-old Bo Burrows and 26-year-old Kyle Funkhauser. They have struggled tremendously over the last 365 days, really, to grow and become better pitchers, guys who you're going to consider to be part of starting rotation. But especially if we get what's being proposed now, which is an 81-game season, you're going to play 6 games a week, so you're going to have a 6-man rotation. So Burrows, Funkhauser, maybe even Joey Wentz, those guys are going to have to get a shot before the Mizes and the Mannings of the world. You look confused over there. Are you good?
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear you say that even with a 6-person rotation that you still don't think those guys are going to come up. That Matt Manning.
Well, so with this season, I think it's going to be the perfect opportunity. You're going to get the best. If there is a minor leagues, you're going to get the best possible minor leagues that you can have. So Mize and Manning are going to be going against the top prospects because there will only be one level of minor leagues if we get it. So that if they're down in that minor league system, that they're getting a start every 5 days. They're not going to have to overthrow. They're not going to have to underthrow. They're going to be exactly where you want them to be because it just doesn't matter like it would if they were on the Tigers. Even for a team that might, if everything went perfect, would win 40% of their games. It just matters less in the minor league system. You want them playing against the best prospects, build their confidence there, and then get them here when they have a full season, all the time to get ready to the major leagues. You don't want them to have to get to the pros and everything's different than it normally is. It's even more insane than it would normally be. If you're playing an 81-game schedule in 3 months, you have a day off every 2 weeks. And I just don't want Mize or Manning's arms to have to be on that schedule. If you want to give them an extra day off, I want to be able to give them an extra day off, which is why I think it's important to give those guys who are a little bit older the chance first. Listen, Burrows, Funkhauser, those guys aren't going to be leading your rotation. They probably won't even be on the back end of your rotation. I think Burrows has a much, much better chance than Funkhauser does. But you at least got to give them 5 innings, 5 starts of 5 innings and see what they're looking like at the end of that. And then obviously if that's not working, you try them in the bullpen. But even with the 6-man rotation, Mize and Manning, I just don't think makes much sense. It's just going to end up being too much stress on their arm, which is the last thing you want for these guys. Point blank, period. It's the last thing.
Let's zoom out for a second. Why are we talking so much about prospects? The season hasn't even started yet.
Right. So the Tigers suck.
Yeah.
There's no nicer way to put it. There's no better way to put it. We have one thing to look forward to as Tigers fans right now, and that is 2-3 years down the road, these kids we have in our minor league system, what they're going to be. Right now, we're looking at 4 of the top 50 prospects in all of baseball, and 3 of them are pitchers. Now, you need to add some hitting talent to the minor leagues, obviously, but you have this amazing crop of young pitchers that is going to completely and 100% determine how the next decade of Tigers baseball goes. If 2 out of those 3 guys flop, you're not going to be able to build a winning team in the next 4 to 5 years. If 2 out of 3 of them work, it's still going to be tough. You really, really need 3 out of 3 of those guys to be at least featured in your rotation. They don't all have to be studs, but they all need to be guys who can go out and start 30 games a year. So pretty much the Tigers are in a position right now where you look at their roster. I mean, the most exciting player in their rotation next year is going to be Michael Fulmer, who is coming off Tommy John. And the reason he's exciting is because he's coming off Tommy John. And we want, lately in baseball, there has been a trend where when younger pitchers get Tommy John surgery, pretty young as Fulmer is, I believe he's only 25 or 26, they come back stronger. We really do have this procedure figured out to a T. Dr. James Andrews is as good as it gets. And sure, you're going to have a year and a half off, regardless of what you do. But it's not unheard of. In fact, it's more common than not nowadays to come back with an extra mile or 2 miles an hour on your fastball with a little bit of extra break in your curveball. I mean, probably the best example, if you want to look at Steven Strasburg, who couldn't get out of his own way coming up, one of the biggest prospects we've ever seen. Tommy John, hurt shoulder at one point, just couldn't get his arm right. And then eventually, as time went on and he got used to 180 to 220 innings a year, he's been a lot more healthy and a lot more capable of handling it.
You were a pitcher when you played baseball, right? You were a pitcher?
I was a catcher.
You were a catcher? But you also, I know, almost had to have Tommy John, right?
Yeah. So it's really a weird feeling what happens. So right here on your elbow, you just kind of feel it go numb. It doesn't hurt or anything. So I was in a tournament. I was 13 or 14 years old, and I was catching a doubleheader. And I was a guy who loved, and I mean loved, to try to pick guys off at first and third. I had a big arm. It wasn't always accurate, but it was big. And I loved to do it, but I had horrible mechanics. What you see a lot of guys doing, and you can see it even with these guys in the minors, which kind of blows my mind, but they'll bring the ball right next to their ear and throw, and it's kind of like a football motion. What that's doing is it's taking your ligament right here, your Tommy John ligament, and just kind of snapping it, and then it snaps back. It's like if you were to stretch out a rubber band. So you could actually take it and strum it like a guitar. But it literally makes your entire arm just feel like it's kind of dead. It just feels like dead weight the whole time. But I know a few guys not much older than me who have got it and, who aren't in the pros, and their arm, even for them, is 100% now. So even when you don't have Dr. James Andrews doing the procedure at this point, we've got it pretty much figured out. So it's really it's a really amazing thing, because in the 90s, it was a death sentence. Your career was over. In the early 2000s, it was pretty much the same thing. It wasn't until the early 2010s when we saw Steven Strasburg and honestly 30% of the young pitchers coming up through the rankings now who have to get it.
Why is that?
So,
is that more than it used to be?
It is, which is weird. It's something I've tried to figure out for a long time. One, I think it's just it's normally not that the ligament's completely torn, right? And you can normally still throw through your Tommy John ligament not being perfect. You might lose a couple miles an hour, but some guys, if it's not all the way torn, you might not even notice. But it is strange because over the last decade, we've seen 100 pitches is pretty much as many as you're going to throw. You're not going higher than that unless you're like Verlander or Scherzer. We very rarely see guys going 8-9 innings anymore. But it seems like this number is ticked up. And I think the biggest reason is because they want to get it out of the way. It's so likely that it's going to happen because people don't realize your normal motion for throwing, for what your body is made to do, is underhand. That's why you don't see any arm injuries in softball, or very few, because your normal motion is underhand. When you start throwing overhand, everything from your shoulder down is just snapping every time. Every pitch, I saw this on Sports Science one time. Every pitch a major league pitcher throws is equivalent stress on your arm to a 60-yard Hail Mary. So you're really just putting a beating on your arm. No matter what you do, it's not natural. It's just not where you're supposed to be with it. But yeah, I think it's mostly just to get it out of the way kind of thing. If you feel me on that.
Coming up later on down the show that I think is going to blow your mind as far as arm statistic. I haven't shared with you yet. I think it's going to kind of make you laugh. So the Tigers are bad. Do we have the right coach for a rebuilding team?
We have the perfect coach for a rebuilding team, Ron Gardenhire. If people remember, back from like 2005 to like 2012 or whatever, he was the coach of the Twins, and he was always taking these teams with little to no talent and little to no payroll outside of Joe Mauer and Justin Morneau and no pitching staff, and having them compete for playoff spots. I mean, think about 2009 when the Tigers went to game 163 against the Twins and lost. Very few people can name 3 players from those teams. And if you take out Morneau and Mauer, very few people can name a single player from those teams. So he's the perfect coach to have for years 1 through 3 of the rebuild, or years 1 through 4 of the rebuild. The question is, once you get back to a team who can compete for a playoff spot and who might be in the playoffs, is he the right guy then? Because what we saw with the Twins was he couldn't get out of the first round. And that was probably more of a talent thing than a coaching thing, because they call it a manager in baseball for a reason. You're not really out there, giving tips and things like that. I mean, you are, but that's not the most important part of the job. The most important part of the job is setting your lineup, deciding who's going to come out of the bullpen when, which is even more tricky now that they've added. So they changed the rule this year where relief pitchers can no longer come in from one guy and leave. They have to either get 3 outs or end an inning. So having a guy like Ron Gardenhire for that is even more important, because you really have to be 3 steps ahead once you get later in the game. Otherwise, you're going to get screwed, and you're going to have righty-lefty matchups all messed up throughout the late innings, which is exactly what you don't want. You don't want your righties throwing to lefties in the 7th and 8th, and you don't want your lefties throwing to righties in the 7th and 8th. The way of the lefty specialist has been done in with and forgotten. They're gone. But yes, I do think Ron Gardenhire is the guy for at least the next couple of years. I do think we might see him decide to leave before we decide to get rid of him. He is pretty old. He was thinking about it. I mean, he was thinking about it this year. It was pretty obvious that he wasn't sure he was coming back. I'm happy he did, because I really want him to be here when the young players start getting called up, because I don't think there's a better guy to lead them. But right now, he's kind of stuck in purgatory of waiting for these young guys, and then he also has to deal with just like low-level AAA talent on his major league team. So I do hope he's here for a couple more years, but I hope that's where we draw the line. I don't want him here once we start competing for playoff spots.
Has he been able to find a Joe Mauer type player through the draft so far? I mean, we've had a lot of first, second, third picks.
Yeah, I mean, we won't really know for at least a couple more years. So really his picks so far are Casey Mize and Riley Green in the first round. But they did have one big hit in the draft 2 years ago, and that's Tariq Scoobo, who's a 9th round pick, who a year later is now the 46th overall prospect in baseball. He was absolutely amazing last year. If he was a higher prospect coming into the draft, he'd probably be like the 20th ranked prospect in baseball right now. He's just absolutely nasty. He had like an 11 strikeouts per 9 last year, a low ERA, just consistent all year. But he was injured in college, so we kind of got a steal there. But I love what he's done. The draft picks from Quintana to Clemens in the 2nd and 3rd rounds to Mize and Green in the 1st round. Him and Avila have done a at least satisfactory job in the draft so far. Trades are a different story, but the draft has been pretty good.
Well, I mean, I think that takes us kind of nicely into the prospect who was traded for Shane Green, who we received.
Yeah.
Shane Green.
So this is a guy I think a lot of people are forgetting about, and that's Joey Wentz. We got him and Travis Demeritt, who, if you were watching spring training at all, looks like he could be about to have a decent year. But we got them in the deal for Shane Green, which obviously was maybe the one really good deal Avila has made so far as a GM, because what were we going to do with Shane Green? If we're being honest, we can't have a guy who with a 2 ERA in our bullpen right now. It just doesn't make sense for a rebuilding team when you can get 2 potential MLB pieces in Demerit and Wentz. But Wentz was like really, really good last year. He moved his way all the way up to Erie. Once he got there, he made 5 starts. He had a 2.1 ERA. His whip was under 1. It was 0.94. So he really seemed to settle in once he got to Detroit. He was struggling quite a bit, not horribly, but quite a bit back in Atlanta in their minor league system. But as soon as he got here, something snapped into place, whether it's comfortability, whether it's just him hitting a hot streak, but something snapped into place. And he all of a sudden looked like a guy who could round out a rotation at 4 or 5. And it's even more important because he's a left-handed pitcher. We have one left-handed pitcher, one real prospect who's a left-handed pitcher right now, and it's Tariq Scoobo. But this is another guy who's going to throw left-handed, who you could eventually add to the rotation, because you can't have 4 righties and a lefty. It's just not going to work. You got to be able to mix it up. In a 3-game series, you're going to want to throw righty, lefty, righty, or lefty, righty, lefty, just so guys can't get comfortable seeing the ball come in from the same side every time. But Joey Wentz, to me, is like the super under the radar right now. People have just forgotten about him. And I understand, because we have these amazing pitching prospects, and this guy just got here, and he's not highly touted. He's not this super big prospect, this top 100 prospect, but he's got really good command. He's got okay velocity, which at least passable velocity once he gets to the majors. And he's got some nice pitches. He's got a nice curveball that could really could develop into a top end curveball, and he's got a changeup that's probably his best pitch, which I love, guys. I love lefties, especially, who have changeups as their best pitch. If you're just dropping, if you're putting 96 up in the upper inside corner, and then you're dropping a 85-mile-an-hour changeup down low, that's the ultimate 1-2 punch to me. It might be old school. It might not be a slurve or anything like that, but it is the 2 best pitches in baseball back to back if you can master them. The other guy who's under the radar, who's still super young, even though he feels like he's been in our minor league system forever, but he's 20, is Parker Meadows. Austin Meadows' younger brother, who is a star right now, or at least on his way to being so. Our number 11 overall prospect. People were a lot more excited going into last year because he had a pretty good year the year before, and then last year he only hit 211 throughout all the levels of minor leagues he was in. But the thing about him that we knew was the bat was going to take some time. He's a 5-tool player. He's got speed. He's got defense. He's going to be okay with contact, and he's going to have the ability to hit for power because he's a pretty big kid. But it's going to take some time. He's a guy who you're probably not going to see until he's 23, 24, 25 years old. But if he rounds out his game the way that the ceiling allows him to, he's a guy who could hit 275 with 20 bombs, 20 stolen bases, and be a way above, not a Gold Glove level fielder, but a way above average fielder. So don't forget about him. Pay attention to him. Watch him if there is a minor leagues this year, if he makes the team, if there's a minor leagues, because he'd be kind of on that outside looking in. But he's a guy who could really, really do some things in the coming years for the Tigers. And he's going to come out of nowhere when he does.
What are they doing with the minor leagues this year? They're just doing AA, single-A?
So the plan right now is just to have one level, so it'd, I guess, be AAA. But if they do have a season, it'd pretty much be one level, and I think it would all take place in Florida. So they'd probably use the spring training stadium, so in Lakeland for the Tigers, but there would only be one level, which is where it gets super, super, super complicated. Because then, let's say Funkhauser and Burrows aren't going to make the team. All right. Then you got Mize, Manning, Burrows, Funkhauser, Scoobo, Wentz, and a couple other guys too. I mean, Alex Faedo, Franklin Perez, if he's healthy. I mean, you have 7 starting pitchers who you really got to see, 7 or 8, where you really have to see what they have and what they're going to be. Now, a lot of these guys have kind of underwhelmed, but that's why I think this is the perfect opportunity to see where they're really at, because this isn't going to be the normal minor leagues. This isn't even going to be normal AA. This is going to be the best prospects in baseball bunched into one, period, point blank. The best prospects. What was that?
Champions minor league.
Exactly. Yeah, it'll be exactly that, and it'll be great because I think for the first time we'll be able to look at a guy's minor league stats and actually put some weight into it, and it'll matter for the first time because minor league stats are very weird. Even though the talent level, I mean, it's a big drop off, but it's not, NBA to college or anything like that. But the stats just in the past, as we've seen, have not mattered. It just doesn't matter what you do in the minors. I mean, obviously, it's good to see a guy hitting 300 in the minors. But for example, Willie Castro was hitting 330 in the minors before the Tigers called him up last year, and then he hit 200 for the rest of the year. But I think this will be a much better way, a much more accurate way of seeing who we have, what we're dealing with, and how high of a level of prospect are these guys.
Why do you think that happened to Willie Castro?
I think a big part of it is just an adjustment to Major League pitching. I mean, of course, that's going to be a big part of it. He is only 23, but he's not like a big guy. So it's a little bit harder when you have these guys who are throwing 98, 99 as opposed to 93 to 95 to be able to just get the ball, into the outfield, to just blue point and to get your barrel on it. And I think that really killed him. And then I think, baseball's 80% mental, at least 80% mental. And I think he just kind of got in his own head once he started out slow and he couldn't dig his way out of that. But I do have confidence he will. I don't think he's going to be a guy who hits 300 in the pros. But could he be a guy who hits 270 with 13 home runs and, that kind of player? Sure. He could be a really nice piece for a rebuilding team while they're rebuilding. Hopefully he's not there on the other end. But I still do believe in Willie Castro to be a good contact hitter in the MLB, a guy who can get on base, and a guy who can really make things happen. He's got to get the strikeouts down, though. He just has to. Struck out 110 times in the minors last year, which is just way, way too many. While he was with the Tigers, he struck out 34 times in 100 at-bats. So that's, even in modern baseball, that's pretty high. What else? Let's see. Riley Green. Something I've thought about recently. I've been trying to put a comparison on him, right? I've been trying to figure out who the right guy to compare him with is, and I think I got it. And it should excite everybody. I have two guys. Cody Bellinger, which is obviously great. The height, the lengthiness, the beautiful, just pure swing, or Christian Yelich for all the same reasons. Yelich might make a little bit more sense because of the concerns with Riley Green's defense. But I'm comparing this guy to two MVPs. Two MVP level players I'm comparing this guy to. And I don't think I'm being ridiculous or overly optimistic. I'm not saying he's going to be competing for MVPs when he's 24, but one day this guy is a guy who can hit 300, he can hit 30 bombs, he can steal 15 bases, and he can play average to above defense. As I was telling you before the show, the biggest concern with him going into the draft was his ability to play the corner outfield spots. They just didn't think he had it down. But once he got to rookie ball and high A ball, they decided to throw him in center, the toughest of all the outfield positions, and he was absolutely fantastic. I mean, I've seen the little bit of those low A balls that you can see. I've seen him making 5 diving plays in the outfield, tracking balls left and right. He looks good out there, and if we can get that guy to go to the corner outfields with decent speed and a good arm, that's huge. I know people don't really think about defense in baseball, but especially in the outfield, it's super important. If you can run a ball down in the gap that other guys can't get to, that's a runner in scoring position. That's a big deal. Outfielders, just the defensive aspect is super underrated, and he has to get there still. Don't get me wrong. He showed us a good defensive outfielder for 40 games, but he still has a ton of work to do out there.
We're going to take a 30-second break, and you're going to load back in, and I'm going to play something.
Okay.
Well, that was all I had planned. Just that one thing. It was going to go at the end of the show, but now it's going to go at the middle of the show. Coming up next, we're going to wrap up some Tigers stuff. We're going to wrap this up, and then we're going to move into best of 5 segment. Next week, I think we're going to try and do a new segment involving some lucky viewer at home with a stable internet connection, if you would be so kind. And it's going to be called The Triangle. And you're going to get to debate one or both of us, depending on how we decide to do it, on three topics. But we're back. We want to do a little more Tiger stuff and move on?
Yeah. So there's just a couple more guys I want to talk about. And the first one's Daz Cameron. People know about this guy because his dad's Mike Cameron, played in the MLB for like 15 years, was a really good player. And Daz Cameron looks like the reincarnation of him. It looks like, you could almost say it looks like his son. The swing, the ability in the outfield, everything looks like Mike Cameron. He just doesn't execute at the level Mike Cameron did. Last year, he was hitting in the low 200s, and we just have to, we got to get that average up. But if he can do that, if he could be a guy who gets to the pros and hits 270, we're talking about like an all-star level player. We're talking about a real problem out there in the outfield. Can patrol center field in giant Comerica Park. So be excited about him, but be wary of him because last year was rough. Last year was really bad. But he's, from everything I've read, everything I've heard, he's the hardest worker in the Tigers minor league system. He's out there every day. He's the Michael Jordan of the Tigers minor league system when it comes to working hard. And then
curveball.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Honestly, like, and then the other biggest question for Tigers fans right now: who are the Tigers going to take number one? And there's two answers here. There's two possible answers, I should say. So, and I apologize about my video here, everybody. I hope it's not annoying you too much. But option number.
That's happening.
It's brutal. So option number one, and the guy who seems like a shoe-in, is Spencer Torkelson out of Arizona State. Broke Barry Bonds' home run record as a freshman at Arizona State with, I believe, 29. Just kind of a can't-miss prospect. A guy who we could see with 70 power, 70 contact when he hits his prime. Like a guy who could hit 330, win batting titles, but also a guy who could win home run chases. Like, this guy is a legit, maybe the best pure hitting prospect we've seen since Bryce Harper. I was reading basically a debate piece about him or Austin Martin, who we'll get to in a minute, who's the other option at number one out of Vanderbilt, where they were interviewing scouts from around the league. And one National League scout said Spencer Torkelson could hit cleanup in an MLB lineup tomorrow, which might be the most insane thing I've ever heard a scout say. I think the last time we saw a guy go straight from the minors to majors was like Homer Bailey or Mike Leach, maybe, for the Reds in the early 2010s. And since then, we just haven't seen it. And it's super, super rare. Even in the 50s, it wasn't happening. Like, this baseball takes a minute. You have to be able to adjust. So to hear a scout say that is saying something. It's showing just how highly some of these guys think of him. But I think the thing that scares a lot of the scouts on him is he's not a superb athlete. He's probably going to play first base, which you normally don't want to go number one pick at first base.
Why is that?
It's just, they just can't do much else besides play first base most of the time. And there's also normally 20 first basemen in the league who can hit 20 home runs and hit 280. So they're a lot less hard to find than the other guys. But baseball is always pick the best player available. And in my opinion, if you're picking a hitter, just the best bat available. Don't worry about anything else. He's got plenty of time to figure it out. But he's can't miss, man. He's going to be a guy who hits 300. I'm almost sure of that. If I had to put money on it right now, I would. Like, he's an absolute stud. He hits bombs on bombs on bombs. He was leading Arizona State through a sweet season before all of this. But the guy he's got to go up against ain't no joke either. The guy who the Tigers could also be considering, and that's Austin Martin out of Vanderbilt, who is the definition of a five-tool player. You've heard me talk slash lines all day, but this is a guy who could win a batting title, hit 25 home runs, and steal 40 bases and win a Gold Glove. He can do every single thing there is to do on a baseball field. Now, the biggest concern for me with Austin Martin is that he could be Dansby Swanson, another Vanderbilt shortstop who went number 1 in the draft a couple years ago to the Braves, who's a good player. He's a good player, but he's not a number 1 pick type of player. He's a guy who might one day be able to hit 300. He might, be a good leadoff hitter, but he's not going to compete for MVPs. He's not going to lead your team on a postseason run, nothing along those lines. But he does come out of Vanderbilt, which is always, something that kind of pushes your stock up a little bit because you're coming out of the Alabama of college baseball. They're just pushing prospects out every year. Every year it seems like the guy going number 1, number 2, or number 3 is coming from Vanderbilt. It's them and it's Florida. That's it. That is it. So basically the Tigers got to decide, do they want a guy who's going to hit 40 home runs for sure? Or do they want a guy who's going to hit 300 for sure and play really good defense for sure? Torkelson floor.
Hey,
however, Torkelson should be the Tigers draft pick.
Let me tell you, there's a 0% chance that they're going to take a 5-tool defensive guy when there's a 40 home run guy on the board. I'm sorry. Would you pass in a quarterback to take a safety? Probably not.
I don't think it's that. I think you're passing on a quarterback I think it's more like passing on a quarterback for Chase Young. Like this isn't, and he's not some guy who's going to hit 11 home runs. Austin Martin can get you 25, 30 home runs once he fills out. He's a 6'3". He's not a small dude, and he's a freak athlete. I just think Torkelson, when you watch him, it almost reminds you a little bit of Cabrera. Like, not obviously, I'm not going to give him that. That's the best pure hitter I've ever seen. But it does remind you just you can see his IQ. You can see him reading the pitcher. You can see he knows exactly what's going on. And like I said, the man absolutely crushes the ball. Absolutely crushes the ball.
Excellent.
Yeah, cool.
Other Tiger stuff for the day?
How many games do you think one last thing. If they played 82 games, how many games could the Tigers win this year? 30? 35?
20. Oh, how many could they win? Best case scenario?
Yeah, best case scenario.
I mean, I think any baseball team can go 500 if they get hot enough.
Yeah, that's fair. I think this team is just so bad, but the injury, we had a ton of injuries last year. Cabrera looks healthy, so 35 wins in an 82 game season, that'd be a good stepping stone. That'd be a really nice step for this Tigers team, who won 49 games in 162 games last year. So it's a good step. It's a good step. But let's move on. That was our Tiger talk for you. We finally got to get through it. I'm happy we got to do that. I know it was a lot of information.
Yeah.
But there's a lot, there's months and months of stuff to talk about that's going to go for years. But let's get to our top 5 best one-hit wonders in sports history.
Okay. We're going to go into that.
Cool.
So mine's slightly different in that I kind of just took like 5 weird, random, unreplicable statistics, kind of in a lot of ways that maybe aren't over the course of the season, except for a few of them. But we'll talk. Well, per usual, I'm playing fast and loose with the rules. Why don't you give me? Let's talk about this guy. I want to get this. I want to make sure I get this in before I end the show due to technical difficulties. Who is this?
Mark the Bird. One of the greatest stories in Tigers history, to be honest. Came up in the 80s and absolutely, and I mean absolutely, set the world on fire. A sub 2.5 ERA. Was winning almost every start, was getting encores when he left the field. He threw a complete game, and the fans made him come back out onto the field after he was in the locker room. I mean, he took this city over. He was everybody's favorite player. It was a 2.34 ERA, 24 complete games. I know it was the 80s, but still, 24 complete games, 4 shutouts, 250 innings pitched. Looked like he was going to be the best pitcher in baseball for the next decade. And then just fell off the face of the earth. It wasn't his fault. There was injuries involved. He showed up the next year and threw 11 starts, was really good, then got hurt. Showed up the next year, threw 3 starts, was really good, then got hurt, and just never could find his way back. The most interesting stat from his great season, though, that I found is in 250 innings pitched, he only had 97 strikeouts, which is like to have a 2.34 ERA where guys are putting the bat on the ball as frequently as they were is pretty amazing. And I wonder if it's part of his downfall that he couldn't get as many strikeouts. And the 80s weren't like today where guys were getting 230 strikeouts every year. You know, you could have a league leader with 170 strikeouts. But 97 over 250 innings, that's absurd. He only had 170 Ks for his entire career. But one of the saddest, one of the craziest, and one of the weirdest stories in Tigers history. If you've never seen it, just go on YouTube and just look at him before games when he's walking around the mound. He's talking to himself. My grandpa and my aunt, who both have been huge Tigers fans their whole life, still to this day talk about Mark the Bird. Like every time we watch a Tigers game, I hear about Mark the Bird Fidrich and just how weird he was and how much the city loved him. Because you know how it is here in Detroit. We love you for being unique. We love you for being a hard worker. And he was both of those things. He had a little bit of crazy to him, which I think we all do, but he didn't hide it. He just let it out. Even when the camera's pointed at him and there's 40,000 people in the stadium, he's just talking to himself, yelling at the ball. Just kind of a freak, but in the best way possible. And if the injuries didn't get in the way, we could have been talking about like a Hall of Fame level player.
Mark the Bird Fidrich is like a great all-time full name. Like 97 won the ticket. We're gonna save the rest of this for later because this is just I'm not doing this. I'm not doing it. It's not fair to y'all. So we've got this coming up. I'm gonna talk about this guy at some point, and we'll find out who that is and what he did. We're gonna do the triangle, I think. So if you wanna lock horns professionally with Andrew or myself, send one of us a message in all of the different ways that you can send people messages now. We're around.
You're gonna lose.
Andrew,
so I'm gonna beat you.
And I believe that. I mean, I've seen Andrew argue sports for a long time, and I'd be pretty surprised if anybody out there off of the streets. The streets, hashtag the streets, was able to do that. So thanks for bearing with us today. I guess I thought we had this sorted, but I guess we don't. So
we're gonna get it figured out, everybody. We're gonna get it figured out.
Yeah. Bye.